Welcome to APA's weekly webinar series, co-sponsored by the Center for Campus Fire Safety, CCFS. My name is Billy Zadig, Standards and Codes Administrator for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage later this afternoon. You will receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with a link to the webpage where all webinar recordings are housed, as well as a link to our upcoming webinars. We have webinars planned out through December 2020, and most are open for registration. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your questions in the chat box, and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. Professional Continuing Education credits, AIA-CLUs, and ICC recertification credits are being offered. For AIA certificates, please send an email to Billy, B-I-L-L-I-E, @APA.org with your membership number if you have not done so in the past. For ICC CEUs, if you are a CCFS member, please email Kathy Tabor at ctabor@campusfiresafety.org for your certificate. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Kathy to tell you a little bit about CCFS and introduce our presenter for today. Kathy, take it away.
Thanks, Billy. And thank all of you today for joining us. And above all, thank you, Tom, for being our presenter. CCFS is a national nonprofit member-based organization, and we've been dedicated to campus fire safety since the beginnings in 1999. We're governed by a 12-person board of directors, and they're located all across the country. The majority of our board are fire marshals on college campuses, fire safety educators and inspectors, and other board members are international industry leaders. Our activities include training programs for campus fire safety officials and emergency responders. We also have annual programs such as our Campus Fire Forum and our Campus Fire Safety Month activities. Unfortunately, our forum for this year is canceled, but it is on, excuse me, in 2021. Visit our website, myccfs.org, and you'll see what we're doing is planning a celebration of the survivors from the Seton Hall fire over 20 years ago. Not only the survivors and how Sean and Al have progressed since that incident, but also how the codes and standards have progressed over the last 20 years. We're a member benefit organization, and as such, we offer free webinars, CEUs, discounts on training, access to an online job board, listserv discussions, networking, a library of resources, and a free e-magazine. So check us out sometime. Membership is $50 a year for college or university or the fire officials. At this point now, I want to introduce Tom Parrish. Tom has more than 25 years experience in fire protection and in emergency response, and he's the fire marshal for the Putnam Township in Michigan. He serves on several NFPA technical committees, including NFPA 72 for signaling systems for the protection of life and property and emergency communication systems. Tom is currently the VP of Telgen and also of AFAA, the Automatic Fire Alarm Association, and is the senior instructor for NFPA. His professional credentials include Level 4 NICET certification for fire alarm technician, Level 3 NICET inspection and testing, certified fire protection specialist, and master electrician. Tom is board certified as a physical security professional by ASIS, the American Society of Industrial Security, and he holds a bachelor's in industrial technology from Keene University. At this point, I'm going to turn it all over to Tom and take it away, and thank you again, Tom.
All right, thank you, and you're very welcome. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out today. Seems like webinars are a new way of getting our training. So it's working. Yeah, I don't know if it's working well or not. Sometimes you like that in person, but the webinars have been able to let us get a lot of information out through a lot of people. After Kathy's introduction, let me move right into it. I do have a normal disclaimer here, although I do teach for NFPA and I sit on a number of committees, including NFPA 3000 also. I can't give you NFPA's opinion on anything. If you need a formal interpretation or anything like that, please contact NFPA directly. I can give you my opinion, but that and $2 gets you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. All right. What are we going to cover today? You saw the objectives before, but we're going to go through NFPA 3000. NFPA 3000 says PS at the end. That was a provisional standard. That's what the PS stood for. NFPA realized, or what happened, the brief history of it is we had some fire officials from Florida and from California went to NFPA, said we're having more of these incidents. We need a document. NFPA being predominant in the industry, being very familiar to fire and EMS people, it was very easy to get a program started there. I'll also tell you 3000 is a very large committee. I believe we have about 60 active members on it, which is almost twice as large as a regular NFPA committee. And we had to invite the law guys. So the good part about having all the law guys there is we know there's always going to be donuts at the meeting. I'm just kidding. All right. But what the provisional standard means is that we followed the standard development process, but we did it under an abbreviated time frame. Now, what I'm happy to be able to say is that this last year we were able to complete the next edition, the 2021 edition of NFPA 3000, and that should be published in the fall, and it will no longer be a provisional standard because we were able to follow the traditional time frame for the standard development. So we lose our PS and we become a big boy document. But just to put it in perspective, that was the only the second time that NFPA had ever issued a provisional standard. It was based upon the needs of the field. So kudos off to them too as well. NFPA 72 I bring up, and I put the 2016 edition in for the slide because that's probably the most commonly enforced edition right now. We are up to the 19 edition, but you know, it's a lot of places, because of the way the building code is, we lag a little bit behind. So 16 is still probably the most heavily enforced and what things are designed to. And the main reason why I bring it up is because we're going to talk about the risk assessments. Now, we're talking about the risk assessments from a 3000 standpoint, but we also have risk assessments if you have voice-based notification or emergency communication systems from the 72 side. So it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. We can use the same risk assessments. We may look at some system stuff a little stronger on the alarm one, and maybe some operational stuff a little stronger on the 3000 one, but a lot of the fundamentals are still going to be the same. Okay. So just a quick code reference. Why do we need risk assessments or analysis? Because of attorneys, but the code reason is NFPA 72, Chapter 24 says every emergency communication system will have a specific risk analysis. Now, 3000, as we're going to learn, is a planning document. All right. I'm going to go through all the chapters of 3000 just by title, and then there's some that we're going to dig into pretty deeply in the next less than an hour. Okay. So as we go into it, NFPA 3000, it's an NFPA standard, so it follows the standard format of NFPA, being that Chapter 1 is always administrative, Chapter 2 is always reference documents, and Chapter 3 is always definitions. Then the only group of NFPA documents that don't follow this is the electrical code, because they have a separate set of standards and rules that it's written under. All right. As we go into the body of the code, though, Chapters 4 through 10 involve planning. And as you see a couple of them in red, that's what we're really going to look into today. So we have our risk assessment, some of our planning and coordination, and then also we have resource management, incident management, facility preparedness. How prepared is your campus or your facility for something like this? And a lot of that is going to depend on the size of your facility and the size of your complex and how complex you are. Some places, if it's a smaller university or college, you may have, a security force there. Other ones may have a full LEO law enforcement presence with arrest powers and everything else. So it all depends on your facility and your specifics. And that's something to keep in mind when you're doing risk assessments. That's why we have to do one at every facility, because they are tailored for the exact facility. It's not a one size fits all. And you're going to see as we go through some more slides how even natural events may affect some places and some sites, then hopefully not affect others. All right, so we'll get through that. We're going to roll through what the rest of the chapters in 3000 are, just so that you're familiar with the framework and that you know that there's a lot of other stuff, but it's really broken up into sections. So 4 through 10 cover your planning. As we move into 11 to 17, they cover the response. We're talking about Chapter 11's Communication Center support. Chapters 12 and 13 are the competencies for the responders. Chapter 14 is our personal protective equipment. That is a term that if you didn't know it before all this COVID stuff, you definitely know it now. From the medical side, it was always our gloves, our mask, our barrier protection, or what we would call BSI, if you're taking a first aid or CPR class. Here, we're a little lighter on the mask requirements and the glove requirements, but we're a little heavier on the ballistic requirements and the vests and the helmets and things like that. One of the biggest things, and this is something that if you don't already have it at your facility, is something you may want to think about, is an identifying garment. Kind of an undefined term per se, but we're going to go with a common sense definition of something that tells you who you are and where you're from. Okay, because if you get a large influx of personnel responding to your facility and responding to your campus, you want to make sure that there's an easy way for all of them to know sort of who's supposed to be there and who's not. We're talking about some very high stress incidents. If we're talking about an Asher event, it could be a shooting, a bombing, a fire, an explosion, whatever. People's nerves are going to be on edge. And if we can eliminate any type of incidental incidents or anything like that, you know, a yellow vest that says police or fire or EMS or campus security or whatever is paramount in something like that. They're really cost effective and can really help streamline a lot of things and give, you know, it'll also give the persons that you're responding to, your victims and your patients and your guests, however you, whichever term you'd like to use, depending on the situation, a way to identify people that they can go to for help. Because you got to remember, they're at the receiving end of a lot of what's going on. And the vests and the identifying helps a lot with their stressors down the road, because they're able to clearly identify who's help and who may not be. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind with that. Chapter 15 is training. Chapter 16, public education. Chapter 17, public information. If you don't have some type of a public information officer already involved in your responses or involved in your facility, it's much better to be in a position to have a professional there to put the truth out for you and the facts from your standpoint than to deal with the Facebook court of public opinion, which I can tell you you're going to get hit with anyway. Okay. But at least get the good public information out there. It can eliminate a lot of your issues down the road, and a lot of things that you may see coming up that it's just easier. And a lot of places use Twitter as well. Okay. Chapters 18 through 20 actually involve recovery. Now, we have a couple different facets of recovery. And a lot of it, you know, chapter 20 covers the long-term recovery. Chapter 18, we're talking about continuity of operations for your facility. You know, if you have a massive incident, are we going to have to shut down? Are you going to have loss of revenue? Did we have loss of life? Are we going to have other issues that we're going to have to take care of, and other things that we're going to have to mitigate in order to be able to, you know, get our operations going? Or are there some things that we can put in place now, or that we can plan budgeting and CapEx and things like that for the future to say, you know what, yes, we have a, you know, a public safety office or a command post that we always go to. Do you have a backup? Do you have a secondary? Could you maybe use the local jurisdictions if you had to? Because what if the incident is actually at your standard, you know, your public safety building? It's one of the normal targets now with a lot of what's going on. Okay, so always have, like, you know, you have an A plan or a B plan, and to be honest with you, I haven't been involved in this for so long. The C and D plans aren't bad to have up front either. If you run out of letters, just start using double A, double B, double C. Okay. Chapter 19 talks about hospital preparedness and response for out-of-hospital ASHA incidents. Any of you that have healthcare facilities as part of your campuses know that NFPA 99 has a whole section on the risk assessment and response plans and everything else for the healthcare facility. And that's great. And you can use the same risk assessment here that 99 wants. So you get an extra bonus one out of that one. Okay. But that is for an incident at the hospital. What we're really additionally concerned with from a 3000 standpoint is also the influx of patients you may have coming to your facility, and how are we going to handle that? How are we going to direct the traffic? How are we going to keep accountability? Because we know that we have a really good, rigid mass casualty incident response program pretty much throughout the country, and it's relatively standardized. I mean, most places are using red, green, and yellow. Which is good, because red means we got to get you there now. Yellow means we can wait a little bit. And green means you could probably walk there on your own if you wanted to, but we'll give you a ride. All right. So we want to make sure that when we start laying out or responding as part of our planning, we generally, if we have a high incident number of patients, we know generally, or with direction from medical control, how many patients a hospital can take and at what levels. What we have to keep in mind with ASHA events is that you are also going to have a massive influx of patients that either self-transport or that are brought there by civilians without medical control. So you may want to have increased law enforcement presence or security presence there to help kind of literally direct the traffic and direct the patients. We may have additional security issues there. If you're, if you're thinking, and this ties in with the 99 requirements for the healthcare risk assessments and all, but secondary target is something that comes to mind that could happen depending on what the original incident was. Okay. And in chapter 20, like I said, is recovery. And a lot of us think about recovery as, okay, we're done with the incident, clean all the tools, put the fire trucks back in service, get everything up and running again. We're ready to go to the next run. What you've got to think about, though, is recovery here generally is broken into a phase of the scene recovery. Then you have short-term recovery, which is maybe a month or so. And then you've got long-term recovery. And long-term recovery could be years. Okay. And that's where we get into a lot of the, mental health issues and things like that on that long-term recovery. And we want to make sure that we have a plan in place, or we have resources available for somebody in the mental health capacity to take on those, or have a co-op or something, have a plan. All about NFPA 3000 is based solely on the planning. All right. There's no, if you get this, we have to do this. It's not like NFPA 72, where it says you have to have a manual station within 5 feet of an exit door, unless something else tells you you don't. Okay. We're not getting down to the nuts and bolts of your operation. 3000 is a guidance document to help you plan for yourself, because there are so many variables. Okay. Now that we understand the standard, hopefully, or maybe we understand it a little better, let's move into what we're actually here for, is the risk analysis. What do we need to include in a risk analysis? Well, everything. How's that for the easy peasy answer? All right. We have to look at the fire risk. Okay. Come on. It's NFPA. We got to go fire first. All right. We have to look at non-fire risk, which could be a lot of different things. And we're going to break this down even further. Response plans. We want to make sure that we have an idea on who's going to respond, how they're going to respond, where they're going to respond to, and things like that. We need to know on our facilities, what is our building use occupancy? Okay, and interesting little twist, my daughter goes away to college next week as a freshman. A lot of her classes now have gone to online classes or electronic delivery, or they've gone to a composite. Now that's going to change your building occupancies, okay? And no, it doesn't change a classroom from being a classroom and turn it into something else. Here, I'm not talking about the life safety code or building code occupancies. I'm talking about the bodies and seats. Traditionally, if school was in session and we had an incident in a building, we have a general idea on how many students are in each classroom and how many people we have in the building, or we have a pretty decent guess. Now, what we also have to think about is that, as well as now the dormitories and the residence apartments and things, where they would traditionally be less occupied during the day because everybody was in class. Now we're going to have more people in those areas, and it's going to be interesting to watch and see if we're going to have an uptick of events and responses, because now we're living in a cave in a lot of places, and we're living in our dorm rooms. Is that going to be an uptick on cooking when we're not supposed to, or just a simple burnt popcorn in a microwave kind of call? Right. So we need to know what our buildings are being used for, what their normal occupancies are. The new occupancies, we'll call them now, with people. Also, you've got your high risk areas, you got your maintenance buildings, you got your, if you've got chemistry labs with the good stuff, that all the good stuff's got to be under lock and key. But even just normal, flammable and combustible liquids and basic housekeeping stuff. All right. And then population driven requirements. Like I said, you get a lot of change in your population. Traditionally during the summer months, you have a very light or low population, because a lot of campus environments don't have a lot going on in the beginning of the summer. Now, as we usually get into August, when we have normal years, we've got sports teams coming back and doing conditioning training and things like that. So we got our uptick. And then, the end of August, we generally got moving weekends. So that's going to bump your occupancy and your population even more. One other thing to think about too, is, do you have sports venues or stadiums and large population influxes, not totally for the full time, but for a daily issue? I live basically in Michigan, between Michigan State and University of Michigan, and I just keep track of the football schedule so I know which way not to go when they were playing home games. All right. And why? Well, what's the big house? Over 100,000 people? That's a population change. That is, about 10 times the population of the jurisdiction I cover as fire marshal. So welcome to rural America. All right. So that's something else we need to think about. And also, as part of our population and population driven requirements, and this is one that we don't always address, we don't always think about. What are the predominant languages that are spoken in your area? Okay. We have some areas in the U.S., where you have a predominance, of English, and then you have a predominance of Spanish as a second language. And a lot of those places, Spanish is the primary language and English is the second language. Well, when you do your notifications, do we need to do bilingual notifications or trilingual notifications? Especially with the voice systems, that makes it very easy to be able to do that. Okay. Because we can record or have recording done by professionals in a native tongue that meets your population. All right. And everybody thinks that, we can get out those stock messages and they're great and they work perfect. And it is, except it's a stock message when you're in a big box retail store and a voice alarm goes off and it tells you not to use the elevators in a one-story building. Okay. Still a good tip. We still tell you don't use the elevators if the building's on fire. Leave them for the fire department because we have a lot of equipment. That's not why. But, sometimes you've got to mold those messages to your population. And that's something that a lot of times doesn't necessarily get thought of or addressed. Okay. So we're trying to tickle the mind on a lot of different aspects during this presentation. Fire risks. That's the traditional role of the fire alarm system, right? The sprinkler system. And we have standard questions we ask. All right. The who, what, where, when, how. All right. Just like doing anything else. So let's go through a couple of those. The who. Like I said earlier, what's the building used for? Is it the gymnasium? Is it an entertainment building? Do I have a 5,000 seat theater there? Okay. For an arts program or something. Do I have a museum? Number of occupants and normal hours of operation, special considerations. Are they doing a play or a presentation that has any onstage pyrotechnics? Okay, that might need a permit from the facility fire marshal or the local fire marshal. Are they following all the NFPA rules back there? Do they have the extinguishers, the hose station, the curtains? all those things that come out of the building code and the life safety code. And we've got to think about them. And we want to make sure we have those addressed and have them in a nice little pile. All right. With the building being used now, also keep in mind that we may be repurposing some buildings because we have to. So make sure you know what's going on with that. As far as your occupants, something to keep in mind here too. Are the people in the building students that normally go to the same building day after day, that could probably wander the halls with their eyes half closed, especially after they were out the night before? Not saying it ever happened when I was in college, but yeah, I could probably meander through the halls and not even have to open my eyes. Or do we have people that it's their first time there and they've never been in a building, so they may not know where stairs are, they may not know where exits are? Okay, and that's really key when we get into our assembly occupancies, into our theaters, into our sports stadiums, into the the different, think about, even if you got a fitness center. All right, you're in the pool and the fire alarm goes off. Where's the exit? First question normally is, where's my towel? Okay, but that's something to keep in consideration as well. Okay, the what's our construction type and our fuel load? Okay, if I've got the bleachers at the the practice field, all right, probably metal or wood and a little concrete, not a lot there to burn. But if I've got maybe some of the dormitories, or I've got the facility storage building or the bookstore, different places like that. So basically, it comes down to knowing what's on your campus, knowing your fuel load, any special processes. Granted, a lot of the universities get some of their funding by supporting either research projects for external clients or actually leasing space to external clients. We'll blame the U.S. government because they do a lot of it, and they're different agencies. What kind of work and what kind of special processes may they be doing in your buildings? Do you know? You may not. There may be security issues and national security issues that they're going to go behind. And, sometimes you just got to play it by ear. And sometimes a lot of those issues, when you get into the national security and different health initiatives and medical research and things like that, you, as a facilities person, you may have some limitations. You may have to invoke higher powers, if only to just review whether or not there's a critical process or something in the building you need to know about. I've done a lot of government work. I have actually written on a report once, man with gun would not allow me in that room. Did not inspect. Okay. So also, what's the fire history of the building? And we're going by the reported ones, because we know if we have a large enough facility or we have enough people there long enough, we're going to have something happen. Okay. Even if it's just burnt popcorn in a microwave, it still counts. And make sure you document everything, because it can help you develop trends and spot trends that are going on. All right. But have we had other fires in the building? Have we had significant fires? All right. One of the biggest things that's going to impact the fire protection and the fuel loads and the stuff in the buildings are lithium-ion batteries. All right. There's a very strong concern right now, and there's been fatalities because of firefighting operations or just the general fire risk when lithium-ion batteries have ignited. Okay. They take a very, very, very large amount of water to put out. They also would take a very large amount of chemical if you're trying to do any type of special hazard system with those. So you really need to make sure that if you have instances where you have those in bulk, that you have reviewed your fire protection systems and made sure that they were actually designed to cover the risk, not just put in because we needed to have sprinklers in the building because the fire marshal wouldn't let us have our CO. All right, sprinkler systems are designed for specific hazard classifications. And a lot of times it's an ordinary hazard, ordinary 2, because we don't know you're going to store hazardous materials in there. Okay, so all that would have to be reviewed as we start repurposing or changing what we're storing in some of our buildings. And we already know about flammable and combustible liquids and having to have that big yellow metal container or whatever color your flammable cabinet is and all that stuff. But, it never hurts to go ahead and review the other codes and regulations and how they interplay. Where? Now, this is some that, has really come into place lately. Are we dealing with issues due to fire or other incidents that are exterior to our buildings? Is there's an exterior fire source? Is it civil unrest? Okay. The other thing that's on here is separation of storage. Why would that matter? Well, think about it. What are some of the PPE items that we are seeing put in every classroom, in every hallway, in every lobby? One of them is hand sanitizer. And one thing we have to keep in mind, whether you realized it or not, most of your hand sanitizers work because they have a very high alcohol content. All right. Some of our distilleries have stopped making their normal product and started making hand sanitizer. Those are the ones that smell more like vodka or tequila, depending on which one you get them from. All right. But that is a class 1 flammable. Okay. So we have to keep that in mind. And if we have more than 5 gallons or so that we're storing, we may need to take further provisions to separate that storage, or we're going to have to put it in flammable and combustible liquids cabinets. All right. Civil unrest. Do we have issues going on with everything that's been going on, depending on where you are? Is there a civil unrest issue that we need to address or that we need to think about? Okay. So all of these things can play into your risk assessment. All right. Now, so what do we ask? Well, how would we expect a fire to start? The other question you can ask is, well, how did the last one start? All right, because if we're looking at this and we're looking at it realistically, there's probably a good chance that if we have a fire we're investigating now, we probably had one before. Okay. Also, did the fire protection systems, did they work? All right. Did the fire alarm system do what it was supposed to? What does it do? Does it automatically evacuate the building? Does it do a partial evacuation? Does it just notify public safety and then somebody responds, and if they need to, they evacuate the building? There's so many different ways that can go that you need to know what's going on in your building. Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit further. All right. Evacuation plans for the building, know what they are. These risk assessments is probably going to help develop some of those or refine those. Main thing is, are we doing full evacuation or partial evacuation? If we go back to our healthcare example, we know that we can't evacuate a hospital as quickly as we can evacuate a dorm building. All right. I can't move people vertically as quickly as I can move them horizontally. So we play the shell game, or we use any of the acronyms that are out there. Okay. RACE is one of them, where we relocate the patients beyond a smoke or fire barrier to provide safety for them, get them out of the initial incident area, and give us time to get them removed. All right. But if we're doing a partial evacuation, that actually may change what our requirements are for our fire alarm system, because now I need to have a system that I can break the building up to and give them different messages. All right. So it all plays together. If we had another incident, we had a previous incident, did the fire protection systems help control the incident? Did the sprinklers work the way they were supposed to? Were all the valves open? Did the fire pumps kick on? If we have special hazards systems, the simplest one that you see on most campuses is a kitchen hood system. We have a fryer fire. Did they pull the manual station, or did the system activate automatically, and did it control the incident? All right. And those are the questions you want to ask so that you can kind of develop a whole understanding of what's going on with your facility and with your campus. All right. Other factors, natural hazards and events. Okay. Now, the good part, I said I was in Michigan. So the good part about me getting hit with a hurricane or a tsunami, slim to none. But depending on where you are, those are real threats, especially the way hurricane season's been going this year. All right. Weather events. Now, nobody's really immune to weather events, and I didn't get to specific weather events. But if anybody's bored and looked at a map, you'll realize that Hurricane or Tornado Alley actually ends in Michigan. All right. And up until they had the tornadoes in Missouri, actually the largest single loss of life due to a tornado was when a school was hit in Michigan, and there were, I believe, over 100 deaths. I'd have to actually look the incident up, but it was a large loss of life due to a tornado that hit an elementary school. All right, so, or elementary mid. All right, but then we had Joplin, Missouri come up, and that trumped the numbers. All right, that's a whole kind of competition nobody wants to win. But we have to know what our weather events are. Are we subject to tornadoes? Are we subject to earthquakes? Are we subject to tsunamis, hurricanes? All those things. Do we just get the typical rain? What about drought? All right. You get out west right now, everything is bone dry. I was in Phoenix last week, and if you walked on the grass and it didn't have sprinklers, it was crunching under your feet. All right. What Another thing to keep in mind for local issues and industrial releases is what's around my campus. Do I have industrial sites around my campus? Do I have any type of hazardous operations that I may or may not even know about? And sometimes you want to get, and we're going to go into who the team players are, but you're going to want to get the local emergency responders involved when you're working on your risk assessment, developing your response plans, because they may have some of that information for what's outside your fences that you may not have access to. All right. And, if you have a chemical plant or chemical storage facility, or even, a place that refills propane bottles, depending on the way the wind's blowing is going to depend on whether or not it can be an issue for you. All right. You have human caused events, okay, that are accidental. All right. We had I'm sure every campus has at least one of these every couple of years. We had the honors chemistry student that cleaned the beakers with the pure sodium out with water. And we set a new land speed record to the burn center with him. Okay, it happens, but that was an accident. Now we have human caused events that are intentional. Okay, some places will define them as acts of terrorism, and it's something that unfortunately we have to also address when we look at these things. We have technological events. All right, we lost the internet. Half the kids wouldn't be able to walk because they can't be typing on their phone at the same time. Or you think back, and man, this is probably almost 18 years ago now. What about the Great Northeast Blackout, when we lost power pretty much from the East Coast all the way to about halfway through Michigan? All right. And then notice the happy face, we have pandemics. All right. So that's what we're dealing with a lot right now. But a lot of that, if we have them included in the plan, we're in a better position to plan for them and to respond to them. Okay. So as we go through risk analysis, we already talked about a lot of things we're going to look at. All right. But what we have to do is we have to make sure that everything's included and that these response plans are very specific to your location. Now, here's the nice part. If you have 5 dorm buildings that kind of form a quad, do I have to do a separate risk analysis for each one of the 5 dorm buildings? No. All right. Because chances are they have similar risks, similar construction, similar protection features. You're going to respond to them in similar ways. Are you going to have maybe a section per building on this is where we're going to park for this one and staging and things like that? Of course. But if you have similar risks, you can group them. Okay. And that can actually add some efficiency and give you a lot less to have to update on a regular basis, because you do have to update these things. Okay. So we want to make sure that we get into our response plans, and they may be developed purely by campus. They may be developed in conjunction with public emergency responders. So, it's going to depend on what your actual situation is and what levels of capability you have to respond. Kean University, where I got my degree, we had a full accredited law enforcement department and an on-site EMS agency. And 9 out of 10 times our EMS agency did more mutual aid off campus than we had on campus. But that was 2 out of 3 that we took care of in-house. And, that's not unheard of. I know some locations where they've got, firefighters on campus where they're living in a volunteer firehouse that can respond to campus, or things like that. So, there's a lot of different programs, a lot of different twists to how we do that. Main thing is know what's happening in your space, know your place. All right. So what should be involved? Who should be involved? I'm sorry. All right. Definitely risk management. If you got a risk management department, they are going to want to be involved with this. Trust me. If you got a health and safety department, yep, throw them on the list too. Security or law enforcement, if you have campus police or campus security, somebody doing that law enforcement function. I put it down as tenant reps, depending on the site issues. Sometimes you'll have housing representatives. If you've got the influx of all of our Greek agencies and Greek associations, you may have a rep from them as well. Okay, that you're going to want to have some interface with. All right, around here that seems to be one of our larger challenges, but they've got a really good handle on them. Happily, it's not my jurisdiction, so. But also your public emergency services. Who's going to be responding? Your fire, your EMS, your police, your local hospitals. All right. Some places we may have a clinic on campus or limited availability for health care. But those are normally operated like a quick care. Okay, I'll use the non-popular, non-political term "doc in a box." So you go there for a quick care thing. It's you can't get to your doctor, or they can't get you in, or it's not serious enough to go to the ER. Yes, you don't have to go to an ER for everything. So you can go to the local clinics. Now, if you have an incident, how is that local clinic going to factor into the responses? Are they going to bypass it? Is that going to be a primary staging point? And then we're going to do additional triage there and then transport off site. Depending, you may have a full university with a level 1 trauma center on campus. So, your local hospital may be one of the buildings you're planning for or planning around. I can't stress the fact that these are so different based upon what you have and where you are. Than I have throughout the whole presentation. Fire and EMS, fire and police. The other one that usually gets left out, but can be very resourceful, is if you have an Office of Emergency Management, or OEM. They have a lot of jurisdiction on major incidents that impact multiple facilities or an entire area. And usually it'll go from a local level to a county level to a state level to FEMA. So if you go through and you have your OEM person involved and something does happen, or you're looking for grant funding or things like that to kind of help do something, there may be some federal or some local or some state funding available through Office of Emergency Management for doing risk assessments, for doing some of the other things, okay? The other thing too, and I think I may bring it up on another slide, but I'll mention it here as well, to work with your fire departments, because a lot of them are doing a lot of community assessments. All right. That is the biggest thing, is community risk reduction right now in the fire service and for fire prevention. They may have done a lot of research for you, and I'm sure they would love to have your data. And then they've got a lot of data that you may actually need. Okay. Especially if you're talking about trying to find out hydrant flows and water flows and things like that on campus. All right. So work together. All right. How do you get all these? Let me just back up a slide. How do you get all these people in a room at the same time? Now we do a Zoom. In the old days, we usually did it in the morning. We told them we had coffee, bagels, and donuts, because everybody will show up for a free breakfast and a cup of coffee. All right. So do I always need a risk assessment? Yes, you always need to conduct a risk assessment and analysis. And before everybody gets mad at me and say, well, so you're telling me we just sat here for almost 45 minutes for you to tell us we always need to do this? Yes, you did. Actually, the first 5 were our introduction, so I won't take credit for those. But here's the deal. You always have to do a risk assessment. But to be honest, your risk assessment may come straight out and say, I don't need to do a risk assessment. All right. If you don't have anything, if you have a very small facility, everything's responded to from the outside, yes, you have your risk assessment and you did it, but your level of complexity is much less than somebody who's got, 14 campuses spread out over 100 square miles and does law enforcement and has a medical center and has a bunch of research labs and everything else. So these really are dependent back upon what type of facility you have, okay, and what you actually have in your facilities, okay. Now, we said we always need it. We got to keep it current. All right. How many people have started at a new job? Because that's how I always like to introduce this one. You just got hired. You walked into the office from the gentleman or young lady who had it before you. You walked into the office. You see the book there, and it says Emergency Response Plan. And you reach up there bravely, and you grab the binder, and you realize the inch of dust that's on top of it. So you hold it to the side. As you blow on it, okay, let's get the dust off this book. When do you think the last time that was updated, never mind opened? All right. We are in such a fluid society right now with everything that's going on, okay? Like I said before, living in Michigan, our executive order count, I think, is up over 160. We might even be up in the 170s now. They're coming out regularly with no set schedule, but it keeps changing the rules. And we've got to adjust to that. We've got to address that. And could some of those rules affect your risk assessment, what you already have in place as a response plan? I hate to tell you the answer you don't want to hear. Yes. Okay. Yes, it will affect us. All right. It might not affect much, but we've got to keep it in mind. All right. So the main thing is, how often do I need to update the plan? The standard engineer and AHJ answer is it depends. All right. We're going to need to update it regularly, but it's going to depend on how many changes you've had. Now, there were a lot of campuses that up until probably, about March of this year, status quo, right? Probably haven't done a major update to risk assessment. We did a couple, and I mean, it seems like after every university has an incident, everybody goes back, dusts off their plan. Okay, what would we, if that happened here, would we have done as good as they did, better, or worse? And that's basically your three categories when you're trying to compare incidents. Right? Because even if you get the after action reports, even if you've talked to somebody there, the reports and everything are great. We get a wealth of information from them, but a lot of times you got to read between the lines due to liability issues and things like that. I have a lot of conversations that I can't remember when I'm doing some investigations and looking into some of those things. So, it's a matter of knowing your answer, knowing your facility, knowing your places. I honestly, as many times as I've said it, you're probably tired of hearing it, so I'll stop. All right. But it depends, and it depends on your location and what you've got. So a couple things to think about. All right. Event response is a risk assessment. Anybody who's ever taken a first aid or CPR class, one of the first questions you ask and you get asked is this scene safe? Is it safe for me to go in there and help that other person? If you break it down, that is exactly the type of decision-making and evaluation and everything else we are doing with a campus-wide risk analysis or risk assessment. We're just doing it on a much larger scale, addressing multiple patients or multiple issues or multiple buildings. All right. If you're, and I hope that everybody does a great risk analysis, has a great response plan, and the only thing you get yelled at for is you spent so much money on this response plan and we've never had to use it. No, that's a complaint I'll take all day long. You spent so much money on fire prevention, the suppression guys are getting bored. Sorry, boss, must be doing a good job. All right. So, risk assessment, like we said, I mentioned it earlier, we get into community risk reduction activities. The risk assessments are part of the community's community risk reduction. So if you have a campus environment and you're located and you have a response from the jurisdiction, having your response plans and your risk assessments helps them gain more ability for community risk reduction. Okay, and it gets into a whole complex thing. We could probably do a presentation just on that. No, that wasn't me volunteering to do it, ladies, just before you asked me. All right. We need to actually look at man-made issues as well as natural issues. Okay. Do you have dams in your area? We learned this in northern Michigan this year. You can have a dam fail. All right. And then we have massive flooding. Well, was that one in our risk analysis? Should have been. All right. So those are things we need to look at. Also, NFPA 1600 is a document for planning for business continuity and emergency response. There's a lot of very good information in 1600. There's a lot of good information in the annex. All right. Also, 1600 has a handbook. It was written in conjunction with one of the staffers who was the Office of Emergency Management Director or similar title for the state of Texas. Personal friend, great guy, but a lot of really, really good information in that presentation and in that handbook to help you with the risk assessments. And I'll be honest with you, 3000 tells you, go take a look at 1600. Okay. All right. So we've got risk assessment on the mind. How do these pictures play into it? Well, what can happen near me? Wildfires, forest fires. Okay. I grew up and started my fire service career in New Jersey, and everybody says, well, what can burn in New Jersey? We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres and square miles of pine trees called the pine barrens. All right. There's also substantial hardwoods and some other things in New Jersey. But when you've been sitting in the middle of a highway that has 3 or 4 lanes going northbound and southbound, and you hear this freight train coming at you, and it jumps over 8 lanes of traffic and your fire line, you get a whole new respect for that orange stuff floating going across the top of the trees. Okay. Forest fires will create their own weather. You should be aware of that and be aware of what they can do and what they're capable of. And they should definitely, if you have a risk of them in your response plan or in your area, they should definitely be addressed in your response plan. All right, and definitely be addressed in your risk analysis. The Port Patrol car on the right-hand side got hit by a tornado. Unknown whether the officer was involved or not, but the car didn't do that good. All right, and look at the buildings around it. If that was on your facility and all you saw was that picture, was it weather? I'm going to see blue skies now, maybe a little overcast, a little dark, but was it a weather event? Was it a civil unrest event? Was it some other type of illegal event or attack? Hate using that word. At your facility or incident? All right. Things to think about. All right. Everybody on there go, okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere somewhere in the middle of, I don't have that forest fire worry. But yeah, this other one on the right here, that could happen here. What about the one on the bottom? You have a nuclear power plant nearby. I bet if you're within 10 miles of one, because there's a lot of federal money out there if you are for emergency response and for different equipment and things like that. Also, they probably want to be using your facilities as an evacuation center, maybe a decontamination area. But you want to make sure that you know what's around you. All right. The best thing that you can do, I don't know if everybody's done it, I have, and maybe I'm just a geek this way. Google Earth is your friend. You go to Google Maps, you click on Google Earth, and you get, drone style footage, not as detailed, not as accurate, not as specific, but enough of a large overview where you can look past your borders and past your facility, and you can pick up things like fuel oil storage tanks, above ground bulk storage, different industrial complexes and things. And those are the things to know about. All right. So what are we actually planning for? Well, all of the stuff and all of the ASHI stuff that we talk about with 3000, essentially, we are dealing with a very high impact, low frequency event. All right. And the thing with these events are not new to us. Everybody has a plan for a severe weather event, or they should. Everybody has that plan for a school bus accident. Do you have an emergency plan for a mass casualty incident or mass casualty event on campus? I'd be shocked if you didn't. If you have trains in the area, do you have plans for that? Large scale hazmat incident on campus or off of campus. Okay. It could be an off campus event, but you're downwind or you're downhill. Both bad days at the office. Okay. Do we have power plant issues? Do we have the nuclear power plants? Do we have, 3 Mile Island over again or Chernobyl? Even coal-fired power plants, for the couple that are still out there, haven't been converted to natural gas, could have dust explosions from the coal. Coal can self-ignite. All right, so you could have incidents there. If you got power plants on campus, how are they fueled? All right, natural gas, clean, great. Leak, bad. Okay, so if you have a gas leak, it's a lot more hazardous than if somebody dumps some coal on the ground or some fuel oil. Not that I'd recommend doing that. The environmental people would be very mad at you. So we might just, but that all ties into the risk analysis, is looking at all the different facets of the process and all of the different things that can go on and that can happen at your facility. Okay. All right, other resources. What else can we find? Like I already pimped once, NFPA 1600, Standard on Continuity, Emergency and Crisis Management. That was originally written for business people, and then government started looking at it going, oh, we can use it too. So jump on the bandwagon. Cool part is, and I hate when I tell people this, but I will anyway, most of you probably know it already. If you go to www.nfpa.org/1600, you can look at that book for free. All right. Now, due to copyright rules and everything else, you can't download it. You can't print it. You're not supposed to screenshot it. Okay. You can't do any of that stuff, and you have to flip through page by page. You can't search it, but it's available. Also, if you have the subscription service or you have, a need, they're available in PDF and still paper now. But good book to have. Like I said, they also have the handbook. Make sure you tie in with your risk analysis. Get a hold of the locals. You probably already have a great working relationship with them, because out of the 200 plus people that are on here, you're on a presentation like this for a reason. And it's probably because you care. Hopefully, it's not just because you needed the CE points. So you probably already have some of those good relationships with your local jurisdictions. If for whatever reason you had one sour with what's going on and everything else, you know what? Everybody still likes bagels and coffee. Drop them off and say hi. All right, just call ahead because you might need a guest pass. All right. All right, so you've listened to me for a whole whopping just about hour. We're open for questions now, and on the question slide as well is my contact information. And I will allow my fine moderator to tell me just how many questions I have.
Okay, thank you, Tom. That was really great.
Thank you.
We have some people that came in and said the same thing, great program, but there's one I want to read to you. And this person said, great program. I will be sitting down with my staff and review our risk analysis. Thank you
Awesome.
for the invitation. I thought that
Perfect.
was nice. But,
Get that.
okay, so we do have a few questions.
Okay.
And the first one is, at Georgia Tech, we have an NFPA code subscription,
Yep.
NFCSS.
Perfect.
The website only shows the 2018 edition of NFPA 3000, and it's
Correct.
in view-only mode. It's not downloadable. Is
Yep.
that all on purpose?
The reason why that is different than every other standard up there is because it was a provisional standard. The only way that you can really download it is if you've got the subscription service. You can do it chapter by chapter. And the reason why it only has the 2018 edition is because that was the first edition. The 2021 edition, it was approved at the online code meeting, the annual meeting. And usually when that happens, we start seeing them, even though it's 2021 edition, you will most likely see that available, I would say, sometime September. That's the general time frame that I've seen with all the other standards. If you have a question on that, I know that the staff liaison has just left NFPA, and I don't know offhand who they've assigned it to. But if it's critical for you to do the whole thing, it's a relatively inexpensive standard. But even with the subscription service, once the 2021 gets issued, then it'll be up there like the rest of the standards, and you can do everything that you can with everything else in the subscription service. It was restricted because it was a provisional standard.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next one is, does NFPA 3000 relate to non-campus buildings? For example, mixed-use high-rise R1, R2 occupancy, high-rise office buildings? Do you have examples of successful risk assessment plans at any of those facilities?
Yes, the nice part about 3000 is it's not specific to anything. It goes over, the points of what you need to look at. But whether you're applying it to a campus or whether you're applying it to high rise or residential, there's multiple good examples out there for that. And if not, if you need specific help, if you reach out to me at the Telgen.com website, I mean, I can refer you over to somebody that does those, and they may have an example or be able to give you some assistance.
Okay. As someone else is asking, and I may not have understood this question, but they're saying, what was that link again? So somewhere toward the end of your presentation, I think it's a link someone's looking.
Okay. Yep. Here we go. I'll do it again real slow, and I'll give you a tip on how it works for everything else. It's www.nfpa.org, and that's NFPA's website. And then if you hit the little backslash, the one that's underneath the question mark, and you type in any document number. So I use 3000 as an example, but you could do 101, you could do 72, you could do 70 for the electrical code. It will bring you to that documents page, and there after you click a couple release boxes and stuff, you can actually view any NFPA document online for free.
Nice. Nice. Okay. Well, I think, thank you. There's just some other questions left about will the presentation be online? And yes, all of that will be online on both the APA website and the CCFS website. And we'll let you all know when that happens. And at this point, it's 2 o'clock. And if anyone has any other questions, just send them. Oh, here's one more. Please tell me how to get a certificate. Okay, we'll get back to you on that as well. It's just for CEUs for Campus Fire Safety, ICC. Just send an email to ctabor, TABOR, at campusfiresafety.org. For APA CEUs, just send it to Billie, BILLIE, at appa.org. And that looks like it's concluded. Other than everyone saying thank you, nice job, Tom.
Thank you very much.
And thank you everyone for participating. And that's it. We'll sign off and we'll get back to everybody by email.
All right.
Thanks again, Tom.
Have a great day, everybody. Okay, no problem.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.